some time ago, President Donald Trump was still the president. There was a transition that took place, and Donald Trump, when he left office, some interesting things happened. I don't know if you remember seeing this, but I certainly do. We started to see a lot of sort of fact sheets come out of the State Department. We saw a lot of reports and analysis coming out of the White House because they knew that their time was up. They knew that they were going to be transitioning out, and all the work that they had done, in my opinion, they wanted to make sure that the American people knew about it. So we started to see some interesting claims about what was happening in Wuhan, in China, and how it relates to the coronavirus. Because if you recall, now, if we fast forward, rewind the clock back to, let's say, March of 2020, we kind of remember that there was a little bit of a different response. We've been through pandemics. We've been through health scares before. We've seen how the government and the World Health Organization and how all of these entities respond on a regular basis. We had swine flu, we had bird flu, we have Zika, we have Ebola. The list goes on and on. We've seen how the government responds. Okay, they send some people in some suits, bubble wrap them up. All right, we kind of clear it all up. Now, I'm not saying that it's something to be minimized, but we've seen how they deal with it. When coronavirus came, it was an entirely different response. It was a military response. We saw the entire world come screeching to a halt. We saw government officials, go in a room and go in a room with a smile, come out without one, because everybody started to sort of recognize that this was not the same old thing that we're used to. This is something much more dramatic. And so in my mind, my first thought was, this doesn't seem like anything like they're telling us feels accurate, because the language that they were speaking, oh, this is just a natural virus that just came out of a cave in China, didn't match that narrative that we had seen previously. All of these other viruses also came out of bats or swine flus or birds or whatever, and the response was what we saw. Then this one comes out of a bat out of a wet market in China, and the whole friggin' world stops. China locks down their city. They're walking around with these big gas humidifiers, these fogging machines, just wasting their entire cities under a cloud of fog. It was a very, very dystopian response, and many of us noticed that. So as Donald Trump then was transitioning from the White House, he had a lot of information coming out, a lot of statements, and he started to sort of pound the sand about China, as he calls it, with that really hard Y in there. So we knew that this was something that was the focus of his presidency. He talked about it a lot. He talked about it in the campaign. Every day it was keeping the pressure on China. And, some people might say, well, that's because Donald Trump is an egomaniac and that was a campaign promise. If you're like me, I think that it probably is a reasonable way to approach international, governance if you're the president of the United States. China does seem like a very significant world actor on the world stage, and it might make sense to engage with them from a position of strength. So what we saw Donald Trump doing sort of made sense to me. And when we saw that the world response to the coronavirus was really, really magnified, it was really aggressive, well, it started to make me ask questions about it too. And so the Trump administration was, of course, investigating it all the way up until the point of the transition. January 20th, something happens. Well, Joe Biden is inaugurated and he gets sworn into office and he takes over. So what happened when he inherited all of that work that the Trump administration was doing? There was already an investigation well underway. What did they do with that? Well, we now know that Biden shut down the Pompeo-led effort to prove the theory that COVID originated from the Wuhan lab. Trump says it was obvious that's where the virus came from. So this article came over from the Daily Mail, written today or yesterday by Harriet Alexander. Says Joe Biden's team ended a State Department investigation into the Wuhan lab. The investigation began by Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State at the time. It started in fall and ran until spring. And we've actually talked about this a few times, this fact sheet that came out from the Secretary of State's office. And it said specifically, we've talked about this, that there were some scientists from the Wuhan Institute of Virology that actually got sick. I think it was October of 2019. And so a lot of smoke leading people to think that there may have been fire there well before China ever formally acknowledged it. Senior State Department officials were unaware of the existence of the inquiry. So sort of this was being done at the highest levels. In January, they asked an independent panel of scientists to evaluate the findings. A 3-hour meeting was held, with the panel concluding that the probe was flawed. So, all right, so it looks like there's a transition here. So we have Biden administration comes in January. They ask an independent panel of scientists to evaluate it. 3-hour meeting is held. Critics of the effort said it was overtly political and it was designed to burnish Trump. So they convene this organization, they convene this panel with these scientists. They conduct this 3-hour BS meeting, and they say, oh, well, no, the analysis and investigation by the Trump people was flawed. Critics who were there say, nah, this was purely political. They basically just, death by committee. They created a committee, sent this issue over there, came back with the answer that they wanted, that what Trump was doing was, racist and xenophobic or whatever. Then Trump says that he had long claimed that the Wuhan theory for COVID-19 was likely. Many scientists initially disregarded the theory, but they're now accepting it. You're kidding. I wonder what changed. Why would that be? Supporters of the investigation insisted it was genuine and well executed, talking about that death by committee. Biden's team in February and March decided to end their research. The Wuhan theory is gaining traction. Trump on Tuesday said that he felt vindicated. And we have a clip from Trump here in a minute. Let's finish the story though. Joe Biden's team shut down a State Department investigation into Wuhan. Last fall, Pompeo led an investigation. The probe was met with internal opposition because it was claimed by those concerned that it was part of a political effort by Trump to blame China for the virus, which, if they're responsible for the virus, shouldn't we be blaming them for that? I mean, shouldn't we, if this came from a human source, is it not inappropriate to find who's responsible for it and assess blame on that? Even if it is the United States, even if it is Dr. Fauci through the NIH, through the NIAID, through EcoHealth Alliance, through Dr. Daszak, then we end up in China with Dr. Xi Bat Lady and the Wuhan Lab of Virology. If it takes all of those different connections to find out what happened here, well, we should get to the bottom of that. If the United States government is funding gain-of-function research that caused the coronavirus, we should know about that. And if we didn't, and China did, well, then we should know about that. And we should absolutely blame China for the virus. Why wouldn't we? When Biden's team was briefed on the investigation's finding in February and March, they shut it down amid concerns about the legitimacy of the evidence. The way they did their work was suspicious as hell, says one department official of the probe. The revelations will lead to uncomfortable allegations for Biden that his team politicized the public health effort, harmed the nation by shutting down a useful inquiry that was begun by his predecessor. Right, it's entirely political. The theory of the virus coming from the lab was promoted by Trump heavily. He blamed China for unleashing the virus on the world. Critics said that Trump was blaming China to distract from his own mishandling of the pandemic. Yet now the idea that the virus came from a lab is gaining mainstream support, with leading scientists who previously expressed skepticism, like Anthony Fauci, now saying it's possible. Trump on Tuesday night told Newsmax that he always believed the virus stemmed from the Wuhan research facility. He felt vindicated that the scientific opinion in the mainstream media was finally coming around to his point of view. Isn't that nice? Once he's no longer a threat, once he's no longer in office, then suddenly, hey, he was pretty reasonable about that. And maybe we should listen to his position. Here he is last night on Newsmax.
I want to ask you about the Wuhan lab. New reporting this week from the Wall Street Journal about workers there being so sickened as far back as November of 2019 that they were hospitalized. The corporate media, now the shameful, biased corporate media, is starting to come around to recognize that perhaps that is the origin, in fact, of the China virus. Even Dr. Fauci is changing his tune. Do you feel vindicated?
Well, I said it right at the beginning. That's where it came from. I think it was obvious to smart people that's where it came from. I have no doubt about it. I had no doubt about it. I was criticized by the press because China has a lot of people taken care of. They took care of Hunter. They took care of Joe. They took care of everybody, didn't they? And people didn't want to say China. Usually they blame it on Russia. It's always Russia, Russia, Russia. But I said right at the beginning it came out of Wuhan. And that's where all the deaths were. Also, by the way, when we first heard about this, there were body bags, dead people laying all over Wuhan province. And that's where it happened to be located. So to me, it was very obvious. I said it very strongly, and I was criticized, and now people are agreeing with me. So,
yeah, because it certainly looks like it. Let's go back to the article. May 2020, Pompeo, following Trump's lead, said there was enormous evidence and a significant amount of evidence to support the claim the virus escaped from a lab. His allies convened an independent panel of scientists to probe the theory. They had a 3-hour meeting to discuss the data. They found that there were significant flaws with the research. They were concerned about methodology. Our scientific consulting process involved assenting perspectives on purpose. It was a meeting with deliberative disagreement. David Feith, a former senior State Department official who was briefed on the efforts, said Pompeo was the only investigation taking the theory seriously. People in the U.S. government were working on the question of where COVID-19 came from, but there was no other effort we knew of that took the lab leak possibility seriously enough to focus on digging into certain aspects. Others were more critical than others. The former State Department official who was familiar with the investigation was suspicious of its secrecy. He said they basically conducted it in secret, cutting out the State Department's technical experts and the intelligence community, and then trying to brief certain senior officials in the interagency on their tentative conclusions, even before they'd let the department leaders know they worked on an investigation was underway at all. It smelled like they were just fishing to justify predetermined conclusions and cut out experts who would critique their science. The reason for all this became clear when real scientists finally got a chance to see their analysis. Senior officials in the State Department did not know of the existence of the inquiry. After the January session, Chris Ford, who was at the time Assistant Secretary, sent a memo to handful department officials, including top leadership, urging caution. Ford called the aspects of the analysis gravely flawed, urged officials against suggesting that there was anything inherently suspicious and suggestive of biological warfare activity about the People Liberation Army at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Eventually, the probe was shut down after Biden officials were briefed on the findings earlier this year. A source told CNN the investigation was shut down because the Biden team had doubts about the legitimacy of the findings. Those involved also told CNN the questioning of their evidence was unfair and unwarranted, insisted they were objective. State Department spokesman confirmed the inquiry had stopped, saying even though this discrete project has concluded, the State Department continues to work with the interagency to look into the COVID origin issues. So now we have the CDC director, Rachel Walensky, who, Trump got a lot of grief for his coronavirus response, but this has just been sheer incompetence, in my opinion. One after the other. They change the rules all the time. Masks, no masks, up, wearing masks, vaccines up and down. Everybody is just sort of playing a political spectacle at this point in time, including the CDC director. Here is Rachel Walensky saying, yeah, well, actually, it is possible, in fact, that COVID escaped from a lab.
What, in your opinion, was the origin of the virus?
This has been studied by the WHO.
Ma'am, I'm asking your opinion.
I don't believe I've seen enough data, individual data, for me to be able to comment on that.
What are the possibilities?
Certainly the possibilities of that most coronaviruses that we know of are of origin from that have infected the population. SARS-CoV-1, MERS generally come from an animal origin. And
are there any other possibilities?
Certainly a lab-based origin is one possibility.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Oh, that probably hurt. Didn't that hurt? He had to really grind that out of her. Yeah. Oh, all right. Like came out of a lab. Might have come out of a lab. Yeah, it's a possibility. All right, jerk. Stop asking those questions. Now, we are seeing sort of a pivot from the administration. To their credit, right? They are talking about investigating this a little bit further. Shouldn't have, in my opinion, stopped the inquiry in the first place, but they did. And now we have the Health and Human Services chief, the secretary, goes by the name of Xavier Becerra. He's out there telling the World Health Assembly that we need to look into this. This story comes over from Axios. Health and Human Services Secretary Becerra said on Tuesday there needs to be a transparent, science-based follow-up investigation. Oh, wonder if he's going to farm that out to World Health Organization. The original investigation at the World Health and by China returned inconclusive findings in March. It was criticized by top officials, including our Secretary of State Blinken. Blinken told CNN at the time that Biden and the administration have real concerns about the methodology and the process that went into that report, including the fact that the government in Beijing apparently helped to write it. Oh my gosh. So it's, folks, this is like, it's like the police investigating themselves and finding they did nothing wrong, except on a global scale involving nation states. So now we have the World Health Organization that says, hey, we're responsible for the health of the world. Okay, we're going to facilitate all you knucklehead countries banging into each other. Then when it becomes evident that something may have happened in China that warrants an investigation, what the World Health Organization does is basically says, well, China, would you like to help us write this report? China says, yeah, we would actually. We're going to take over that whole thing for you. Thanks. Take it over, write the whole report, send it over to the Biden administration. Biden says, well, we have got to take their word for it because we stopped our investigation. So that sounds as reasonable as anything. What they're saying now, Phase 2 of COVID origin studies must be launched with terms of reference that are transparent, science-based, and give international experts the independence to fully assess the source of the virus and the early days of the outbreak, Becerra said at a virtual meeting. So, right, I think that's great. I would love to see some government resources sunk into it. I would like to see something that is transparent and science-based and gives the, I don't actually really care much about the international experts. I don't care about them. I care about what the United States experts have to say. In other words, if China says that it did not come from China, well, that's their prerogative. But we have our own experts that should be investigating it for ourselves. We don't need to take their word for it or the World Health Organization's word for it. So maybe that's worth an inquiry. NIAID Director Anthony Fauci said at a White House briefing on Tuesday that he believed the coronavirus came from a natural occurrence, but that further investigation was needed, which is a little bit of a change for him, right? Remember that this guy sort of flip-flops on every issue humanly possible. Don't wear masks, then wear masks. Then wear 2 masks. Then wear one when you're vaccinated. Then you don't need to wear one when you're vaccinated. Then it stays on surfaces for 30 days, then 14 days, then that's kind of a couple hours. And, it just keeps changing. And it changes yet again. Now he's saying that maybe it did, in fact, come from a lab. Well, where was that a year ago there, doctor? Wasn't anywhere. Of note, Becerra also addressed the Chinese government's opposition to the World Health Organization granting recognition of Taiwan. We have a flashback. The report identified 4 possible origins of the virus. We have a direct zoonotic spillover, which would be something from an animal to a human through an intermediary, introduction through an intermediate host. They say this one's likely to very likely. The introduction through cold food chain products, also possible. Introduction through a laboratory incident, which the World Health Organization team said was extremely unlikely. All right. Well, if you have not read the Nicholas Wade article, he also goes through 4 factors, including geography and afferent cleavage site, and some other very interesting factors that I think are more relevant than this analysis. So I'd encourage you to go read that article or watch the video that I made about it. The other side, Zhao Lijian, a spokesman from China, said the following: the U.S. has been speaking out on the report. By doing this, isn't the U.S. trying to exert political pressure on the members of the World Health Organization expert group? So China doesn't take crap from anybody, including the United States, including this administration. I'm not sure that we got the same type of language from them with the prior administration, but they are openly thumbing their noses at this administration. And we've seen, this is a second example of this. We saw this when Blinken tried to go in there and scold the Chinese during that delegation that they sent over. I think they met in Hawaii. He goes out there and says, your government is doing bad things to the Uyghurs in China. And that's racist and xenophobic, and we don't stand for that. We are a humanitarian nation. And the Chinese, he just said, excuse me? How dare you talk to me like that? How about before you criticize China, you get your own house in order? We've been watching the BLM rioters wreck your entire country for the entire month. So, Mr. American, don't tell China about human rights violations until you get your own racial problems in order. And then they basically left. That was the end of that conversation. And so Blinken looked like a fool getting his ass handed to him by the Chinese. They're doing it again. So Blinken is now saying, hey, we're going to look into this a little bit further. The Chinese say, oh, you're exacting political pressure on us? Sounds like you're trying to influence the World Health Organization. You manipulative Americans. You guys are the worst. And what are they going to do about it? Nothing. They're just going to roll over. They're going to say, oh, no. They're going to go back and they're going to say, here's what Becerra says. We need to give international experts independence to fully assess the source of the virus. Hey, jerk, we already did that. We already gave the World Health Organization and China and everybody a lot of time to go in there. And guess what happened? They put together this report that's a bunch of BS, as is to be expected. So we're going to let them do that again? Is that what you want? Meanwhile, they're making you all look dumb, and they're making America look bad. And it makes me mad because I happen to be an American and I love this country a lot. And so when you blow foreign affairs and you can't get to the bottom of what is happening with the biggest pandemic that we'll probably ever see in our lives, that's a major failure. All right, so here's what he said specifically. 74th World Health Assembly. He goes there yesterday, says, Assembly President, on behalf of the United States, I want to extend thanks to the leadership of the World Health Organization. For what? And the staff who have worked tirelessly. I want to thank the Pan-American Health Organization for leading efforts to combat the pandemic, deliver supplies and vaccines. I also want to express our gratitude and support for the frontline workers. We can agree with that for sure. COVID-19 pandemic not only stole a year from our lives, it stole millions of lives. Yes, it did. It's a big deal. This is a big deal. Now we must honor our departed by taking urgent action this year to strengthen health security, pandemic preparedness, and to better prepare ourselves for the next global health crisis. Nothing wrong with that. This means improving global triggers so the countries take swift action, Global health security financing mechanism. They want more money, accountability, and oversight. We got to develop surge capacity. We cannot forget that people are the backbone of our response. We got to have a healthy workforce, and we must do more to understand our current pandemic and look forward to detecting more biological threats. Phase 2 of the COVID origin study must be launched with terms of reference that are transparent, science-based, and give international experts the independence. All right, so we already read that. Now, again, I don't care about the international experts. As member states of the World Health Organization, we need to come together and finish this fight against COVID. We need to fully implement and adhere our obligations. We need to improve transparency, share critical information. Rest of this is pretty basic. We must invite Taiwan to be a part of the World Health Assembly as an observer, not as a country, because that would anger China. Challenges are before us, but they're not insurmountable. We begin by ensuring resilient global health systems together. Oh, here we got equity here. Can't ever get out of any statement from this administration without equity. Together, we must address racial, gender, and other forms of inequality, promote sexual and reproductive health rights, and strive for equity across society. And an inclusive global public health approach must also include, of course, minorities, women, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex populations. Those got to go in there. Got to make sure that's in there. Otherwise, it's not an official address. We must continue promoting critical nutrition and vaccinations, fighting HIV, tuberculosis, and addressing climate change, which is a very important thing for health. Did you see anything in here about exercise or like physical fitness or getting out and doing anything? I didn't, but I saw a lot of other stuff. We will do things together, strong and agile. World Health will beat the pandemic. All right, so whatever. All right, so there you go. That's what our Health and Human Services director is out there saying in front of the world. Let's look into this and let some other independent experts who've already done their due diligence and found nothing do it again, I guess. So now the media is flipping back and forth a little bit on this stuff. Kind of fun. Here is Washington Post head fact checker. So Glenn Kessler is on Twitter. And, you know, the COVID stuff has been so fun because people were very aggressive one way when this all first happened. And so Glenn Kessler was out there really unhappy with Ted Cruz in the early months and weeks and days of the pandemic. Unhappy. Said, well, you know, everything you're saying is stupid. You're an idiot. How dare you be so anti-science? And then, of course, we fast forward. And what Glenn was talking about previously was the lab leak theory. And that was an asinine concept. But now, it's not a bad concept. So we gotta rectify those two positions. You called everybody a moron, and now you're saying it's might be possible. What's going on here? Tyler Durden over at Zero Hedge says that with the COVID lab leak theory finally gaining mainstream legitimacy, following reports from the Wall Street Journal and an admission by Fauci that he's now open to the possibility of a lab leak theory, formerly smug establishment fact checkers are now scrambling to salvage their reputations after categorically dismissing a lab leak as a debunked conspiracy theory. Right now, Glenn Kessler is a fact checker. Okay, he checks facts, and he's over at the Washington Post. Right now, he is somebody who tends to lean one direction or another. Right, typically towards the left. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. The latest fact checker to bend the knee is Washington Post Glenn Kessler, who last year issued a snarky tweet to Senator Ted Cruz in response to Cruz accusing the WAPO of, quote, so Ted Cruz is saying, hey, Washington Post and Glenn Kessler, you are abandoning all pretenses of journalism to produce CCP propaganda. CCP propaganda is Chinese Communist Party. So Ted Cruz says you're abandoning journalism and you're producing propaganda. What was he responding to? To a video suggesting that an accidental lab leak was doubtful. So here's what this looked like, right? There is a very loud car outside of my window right now. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's some loud music going on. Not sure what that's about. So anyways, carrying on. We have from Glenn Greenwald over here on Twitter. He's sharing this concept of basically what happened here. So we have, so Rob Amari says, I never want to hear about PolitiFact ever, never. I'm going to use these two screen caps if anyone ever cites that source. So here's what we've got over from PolitiFact, archived fact check. Tucker Carlson guest airs debunked conspiracy theory that COVID-19 was created in a lab. So PolitiFact goes through there, right? And they debunk this. So Tucker brings a guest on the show, and the guest comes on and says, yeah, no, there's a theory out there that it might have been created in a lab. There's a Wuhan lab of virology. It's right there in the middle of Wuhan. It's a level 5 lab. There's only so many of these in the world, and we think that this is maybe where it came from. So PolitiFact comes out and says, oh, no, that we fact check, false. We don't buy that. Then they sort of archive it. So once this information comes out, they archive it. And on May 17th, they write, when this fact check was first published in September, PolitiFact sources included researchers who asserted that the virus could not have been manipulated. Well, that assertion is now more widely disputed. For that reason, we are removing this fact check from our database because it's not a fact check, because they're not a fact checking organization. That's not what they do. They just sort of look at things and they say, well, we're going to just say this because this serves our political ends. It's a political organization, not a fact organization. Glenn Greenwald said, fact checking, like virtually everything the corporate media does to feign superiority is a total scam. Just another way for them to smuggle their own ideologically driven disinformation and conspiracy theories under a more elevated facade, right? Oh, hey, Washington Post fact checker said that's not true. Okay. Everybody goes, oh, well, there you go. They checked into that for us. Here's Glenn Kessler. This is back in May 1, 2020. So this is the tweet. Ted Cruz says amazing is definitely the right word for this video. Washington Post abandoning all pretenses of journalism to produce CCP propaganda would be another way to put it. If this reporter submitted this video in a freshman logic class, it wouldn't receive a passing grade. Let's review the facts. So Ted Cruz posts this. Then Glenn Kessler posts this. He says, I fear Ted Cruz missed the scientific animation in the video that shows how it is virtually impossible for this virus to jump from the lab, or the many interviews with actual scientists. We deal in facts, he says, and viewers can judge for themselves. Well, we are. Yeah, we are. And you're actually not dealing in facts, are you? Because facts are pretty consistent. Like, they don't really change all that much. It's a fact that 2 times 2 equals 4, right? That's a fact, I think. I'm bad at math. Pretty sure I got that one, though. We have 1 year later. Here is Glenn Kessler now. So this is what he said in May. I fear Ted Cruz missed the scientific animation. You know, if you have a scientific animation, that also makes it official. So now we fast forward. Kessler is the proud owner of a highly ratioed tweet. And that means that you have more comments than you do retweets or likes. So you've got a lot of comments. That means nobody likes the tweet, but they're certainly talking about it. He says they're being forced to eat crow over his fact checking. So then he comes out and he says, new fact checker timeline, how the Wuhan lab leak theory suddenly became credible, written by the same guy who basically 1 year ago said it's virtually impossible for this virus to jump from a lab. Right. And I understand that people make mistakes and that new evidence comes out. But what I just really detest is when people come out and they should know, or they know better, that they don't know what the answer is on this. And, you know, we didn't know what the answer was on that. And for somebody to come out and just be definitive about this, especially in a position like he's in, where he is supposed to be this objective fact checker, and he's holding himself out as that. He's saying, I'm objective. I am somebody that you can trust. Anytime that there are these claims that are being made out there, I'm going to be the person who can get to the bottom of it, dissect it, and give you the answer. And he's totally disingenuous about it. There was plenty of evidence last year, but they, as a decision, Washington Post wrote an article and made a coherent decision that they were going to take this side of this issue when there was no evidence to support it. And it's more than that, okay? It wasn't like they just said, listen, we've done our analysis and we don't think that this came from a lab, but it's reasonable to sort of think differently. We're just skeptical of it. That's not what they said. They said it's virtually impossible. Actual scientists. We deal in facts. We also have an animation. We animated it. Ted, you idiot. We've got an animation. Where's your animation there, Cruz? Well, it turns out the whole thing was totally fraudulent. They had no real evidence about anything. It was all propaganda, just like Ted Cruz talked about. Said it didn't suddenly become credible, Glenn. It was always credible. It literally always made the most sense. I understand the desired narrative media always wanted, but didn't anyone think that the most likely scenario was that the virus originated from the feet from the lab that worked with it? So Donald Trump Jr. posted that. Stephen Miller posted this, says, yeah, you should probably revisit this one, right? Ted Cruz missed the scientific animation. The list goes on. Here's Karen McLaren says, we deal in facts, mocking this guy. I like the line about actual scientists, but now I'm curious how it could be virtually impossible for a virus to get out of a lab that studies viruses. So who are those people? Who did they talk to? Who were these actual scientists that he mentioned? Who drafted that animation? Where are these people? Like, do they get called? Do they get held to that standard? I guess not. Speaking on the issue of destroyed credibility over early Wuhan reporting, CCP apologist is retired New York Times editor Nicholas Wade. He slammed the mainstream media on Sunday for failing to investigate the origins. Wade said the media failed to take off its political glasses because it was political season. They only had one thing in mind, that was beating Donald Trump. They don't care about any of this other stuff. I think we see a sustained Chinese propaganda effort at work, said Wade. He went on Mark Levin's show. He says, quote, but more than that, it was just the blindness, if I could put it that way, of our media. We're too polarized to see scientific issues for their own sake without putting a political gloss on them. We don't know for sure the origin of the virus is just, we've explained these two possible scenarios. But if you look at all the evidence and ask yourself, well, which scenario explains all these facts better on the present evidence? It seems to me at least that the lab escape hypothesis explains it a lot better. And if you read the article, you'll see how obvious it is. But it's sort of a complicated conclusion to arrive at. I can only assume the media was blindsided. They didn't do the work that was necessary because they are not reporting information. They are activist journalists who are trying to achieve a political outcome. It has nothing to do with the truth at this point, and at least during last year, it had nothing to do with that. We saw right through it. Let's not mince words, Wade. The media opposed the lab leak theory because President Trump promoted it. Yes, the CCP has its tentacles deeply embedded in American propagandists who breathlessly peddle their talking points, which is, I couldn't have said it better myself, so I won't. We'll stop there. We have some questions coming over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's jump into them. We've got John Delar is in the house. He says, how convenient. The virus gave Biden the election. Trump's calling card was his great economy. He wouldn't have lost without it. Well, abracadabra. Here comes a virus from China, Trump's biggest enemy. It tanks the economy. Most convenient, timely virus in history. Give me a break. The virus was a bioweapon. The Democrats don't want it investigated because it gave Biden the election. It's so obvious. It does feel like that, doesn't it? You couldn't plan it better if you tried. Donald Trump has this roaring economy. America is hustling and bustling. 2019, our business was booming, rocking and rolling. Everybody's growing. Things are going great. Low taxes, kind of a golden age. How do we stop that? How do we take the power out of a booming economy? How do we take Trump's strongest strength, which is his in-person rallies, these mega rallies, and just put a tamper on those down? Just, nope, can't do those anymore. Virus is pretty convenient for both of those things, isn't it? Kind of puts the economy at a rolling stop and then make sure that the big mega rallies that got him elected last time can't really do those anymore and really suck the air out of the room. We have Pinky number 2 says it was true about the virus coming out of China the entire time. Trump, through the Space Force, has eyes on many areas. B tried to shut it down, supposedly win, but not that he did. Yeah. Space Force. We have Sherry Quinney says science-based. Are they kidding? This is the same outfit that doesn't believe in the science of biology and genetics. Good to see you, Sharon. We have Besimiento says the international component to the Biden misinvestigation is China, which was invited to participate. Right? They're investigating themselves. Oh, no, we didn't do anything wrong. We checked. Well, can we go check your work? No. You cannot go check our work. But we don't trust you. Well, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. They're not going to do anything about it. We have Liberty in the house as, this is crazy. As you know, I teach Chinese Kung Fu, and we have a family in Hong Kong, and we have family in Hong Kong and all over China. It was common knowledge that there was an issue out of Wuhan in October 2019, especially after the disappearance of 20 million people in China. There used to be videos of the Chinese military walking through a city and shooting people sitting on their stoops. We even purchased 500 masks to send back to a family in Hong Kong at that time. This is very irritating. Wow. That's scary stuff. I mean, I don't remember seeing the videos of, military shooting people, but I remember some very disturbing imagery coming out of China. I mean, the streets were just locked down. There were people, in hazmat suits fogging entire streets, just fogging, like shooting like a flamethrower, except, I don't know, alcoholic mist or whatever to disinfect the air and disinfect the streets and the sidewalks, just going through buildings, just mowing everything. It was a wild scene. And who knows? I mean, what can you do? Trust them? I don't. Pinky number 2 says B owes China for their bribes. B is not going to try hard to convince anyone that China is involved, let alone responsible. Yeah. No, the whole thing is just a show. The whole thing will just kind of, flow over. Sasha Sisha's in the house, says, hi, Rob, Ma, and Miss Faith. Biden is canceling the Wuhan investigation and encouraging a white supremacy investigation. I'm still waiting for Ashton Kutcher to come out and say, you've been punked. Well, don't hold your breath, Sasha. That would be nice, you know, Ashton Kutcher. Oh, got you. Don't think that's happening. This is real. We're in real life. As Rachel Maddow said. Remember when she said that? This is real. This is real life. This is our reality now after Trump won. All right, here's Nadar Blasier says, can we please point out that she actually said these words? Isn't that what she is saying? Isn't what she is saying a bad thing, or am I missing something? And we have administered over 250 million doses without any concern for safety. Yeah, I mean, I would think that you would think that the CDC director would be concerned about safety. But maybe she's not. I don't know. We have Jeremy Matrita says the only facts these fact checkers have proven is that they are not actually checking facts. Yeah, that's right. And that's obvious. That is a fact that you can take to the bank. Okay. These fact checkers don't actually check any facts. That's a fact. Very circular. See how you can do that? Anybody can be a fact checker. You don't even have to do anything meaningful. You can just say, I'm checking facts now. Start a website, create a blog, do whatever, check some facts. That's about what they did. And people listen to them for some reason. Tree Mendes is in the house, says, I've reached the point when they use the word debunked about something, I assume there's at least some truth to the claim. Unfortunately, because all we have is the mainstream media giving one extreme story and the right-wing media giving the opposite extreme story, I'm stuck with digging for the facts from both stories, seeing what matches, and then using common sense to come up with a conclusion. It can be exhausting. Tell me about it, Tree Mendes. I know. It is exhausting. And you got to sort of, you got to have one foot in both pools a little bit just to see what are these people talking about? What are these people talking about? And then we try to mash it together here and dissect the truth, which is why I'm so grateful that you're here, because we have a group of people working kind of through all of these things together. It's good to have some friends going through it, because you're right, it is exhausting. And we're having some fun while we're doing it. We got Liberty or Death says, let's not forget how woke this virus is. MAGA rallies are super spreaders. George Floyd riots were protected by the First Amendment protests. Yes, the virus had a very weird modification. So, this also leads me to think that the lab leak theory is true, because there's a special site in there. What you're doing, when you talk about this furin cleavage site, it's really sort of we're cutting off different parts of virus RNA, cells or whatever. We're sort of mashing them together. And what we have here is an exception on infection for George Floyd riots. So you're protected. It's a genome exception. So if you're basically COVID immune, as long as you're attending one of these supported provable rallies. That's a joke. No COVID advice on this channel. Lastly, we have Anki Wo says, Biden stopped investigations to appease Z and protect Hunter. Did you see the Chinese professor boasting that China won the biological war? No, I didn't. You know what I did see, though? I saw John Cena out there making that video for the Chinese, which was really, really cringy, but that was interesting. I've got another. Anyway, we're gonna leave it there. Thank you for those great questions. All came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com.